Hey everybody, today I'm going to be reading more of your ghost stories. This first story comes from Kay, located in Utah. I used to have a porcelain doll that was given to me by my grandmother for Christmas, many years ago. I have had a ton of experiences with this doll, but I will just share one. Before I left for college, my sister and I moved the doll into our closet where it used to be on a shelf in the room. We moved it because of all the creepy things that had happened previously. When I was 20 and home visiting from college, my sister and I shared a king-size mattress that was on the floor in the middle of her room. At night, one of my dogs, Echo, would always sleep at my feet. The first night, I had heard something in the closet, but thought nothing of it because the house was infested with mice. A few nights later, I woke up to the sound of a soft giggle or maybe a hum, and when I opened my eyes, a small 2-foot shadow darted from my face towards the closet, and then followed closely by my dog's deep growl. He had seen her too. I no longer have this doll, but I'm always afraid she will find me. This next story comes from Ashana, located in Oklahoma. About 3 years ago, me, my now ex-husband, and our 3 children moved into a 2-story house. It seemed fine the first few weeks of living there, but after the 3rd week, creepy things began happening. My youngest daughter would avoid the upstairs back bedroom, claiming there was a scary man in a funny hat up there. And our 2 sons would see shadows and hear voices in the bedroom to the point they wanted to sleep with me and my ex. My ex-husband would wake up with bruises on his arms and legs and cuts on his back. One day my husband was taking the kids out to the park while I stayed home and did laundry upstairs. I was busy doing laundry when I heard a crashing downstairs. I rushed to see what had happened, but while I was walking down the stairs, I felt 2 hands on my shoulder blades, and I was pushed down about 15 steps. No one was home at all. This next story comes from Mia, located in Norway. This happened in the house I lived in from when I was 12 years old until I was 18. It wasn't a particularly old house, but the area it was in has a lot of history, and there were archaeological excavations being done all the time. The paranormal events started very soon after we moved in. First, there was small things like lamps suddenly turning on and off, things disappearing and reappearing in unexpected places, and the occasional sound of banging. Soon, though, it escalated. My room was upstairs and my sister's was downstairs, and almost every night we heard heavy footsteps going up the stairs towards my room. I would shout, "Hello," and would hear my sister shouting the same at the exact same time. The kitchen would be a proper circus of sounds during the night, with drawers being open and shut and glasses tingling. Our chandelier over our dining table would frequently start swinging on its own. First, very slowly, then picking up speed until we had to physically stop it so it wouldn't fall down. My scariest experience in the house was when I was home alone and sitting in the sofa watching TV, except it was so hot that I was sitting on top of the back of it, with my back facing the open living room. I could suddenly feel the hairs stand up at the back of my neck, and right after, something stroked my back with such force that I jumped and almost fell off of the sofa. It literally felt like someone had run their fingers down my spine. I ran out of the house and waited in the driveway until my family came home. After we moved out, my mom met the new family living in the house at the shop and asked them if they were happy there and how they were doing. The lady answered that they loved the house, but that they definitely were not alone. This next story comes from Eugene, located in Texas. I was just a little kid, maybe about 8 or 9. My stepdad was always drinking and was always causing problems. He would lock me up in closets, spank me and my siblings. One night, my stepdad drank a little too much and passed out. I went to sleep that night and a little thankful that my dad hadn't been awakened to hassle me. After I fell asleep, I woke up and noticed a girl in my room in the doorway. I believed it to be my sister, Alyssa, and said, "Alyssa, lay down, it's late." I then looked over to my sister's bed and saw that she and my other sister were both laying down, asleep. I looked back to the doorway and the girl was gone. I didn't get up because I was scared that someone had broken in and I pretended to be asleep. And eventually I did fall asleep. When I woke up, my mom had made breakfast, and my dad walked in and said, "You guys will never guess what happened to me." He then told us last night he woke up and saw a woman in a white dress at the foot of his bed, and she told him to not drink anymore because it would ruin his family. I'm still not sure what happened, but eventually my mom left him, and I've had continual supernatural experiences since. This next story comes from Melanie, located in California. Growing up, my family was very connected and open about the paranormal. My dad and his girlfriend at the time would always watch TV shows like Ghost Hunters, and I'd watch it with them. When I visited my grandmother, we would talk about experiences that we have had in my house, and after experiencing a handful of things, we concluded that something was there. One day while sitting by the pool at my grandma's complex, we started to talk about the paranormal. I asked her if she could give me a sign that she was still there when she passed away. Whether it was a knock, turning off the lights, I wanted something. At the time I was only 12 years old or so, and thinking about it today, I'm shocked that I was actually confident enough to ask her for something like that. Fast forward to about 4 years later, after struggling with depression and having an alcohol addiction, my grandmother passed away on Christmas Eve. We aren't sure what exactly happened. It was ruled that her death was an accident, but my dad fully believes that she killed herself. I was heartbroken. My grandmother and I were really close, and I was in such shock that I couldn't handle the situation. My dad and his girlfriend left to go to inform other family members and deal with the police. After a while, I took a bath and was trying to calm down and compose myself while my sister was asleep. I heard a knock on the door and automatically said, "Come in," thinking my sister had woken up. When there was no answer, I went on with my business and got out a little later. Out in the front room, my sister was asleep on the couch. I woke her up and asked her what she had wanted from me. A bit disoriented and confused because I had just woken her up, my sister looked at me like I was crazy, and she said she hadn't gotten up. I didn't really connect the two until a year or two later. I believe that knock was my grandmother telling me that she was there, and that she was with me, and that she was fine. This next story comes from Joanna, and I hope I said your name right, from Texas. When I was in 3rd grade, I was going through a hard time, my parents always fighting. I had a very bad anxiety and depression. In my school's library, there was a Raggedy Ann doll. I thought it was extremely creepy and got a really bad vibe from it. In my gym class, they would always make us run laps outside, and one day I was running by myself when I happened to look down this big sewer. It had those thick bars that you could see to the bottom of it. At the bottom, I could see what looked like to be the Ann doll I'd seen earlier in the week in the library. For a second, I thought I was imagining it, and it scared me, so I ran another lap, and when I came back around, I saw it again. I decided to tell my friend, and at first he thought I was kidding, but he could tell I was scared. We decided to keep this between us, and were terrified to turn past there by ourselves. For 4 straight days, we saw the doll in the sewer, and the 5th day it was gone, so we felt somewhat relieved. That day, when we got done running, we went inside and I made my way to the girls' bathroom. When I walked in, I felt frightened, but I tried to shake it off. Like most public restrooms, when you walk in, you have to go around a wall to get to the bathroom. When I walked in, I could not believe what I was seeing. There was bloody handprints all over the wall and what looked like to be black hair smeared in with blood. I walked over to the sink and rubbed my eyes. I looked at the sink for a second, then looked in the mirror, and behind me was a girl dressed in our school's uniform. She had blood all over her white shirt and on her hands. Her black hair covered her face, and she seemed to be crying and mumbling something. She dropped on her knees. I was terrified and ran out of the bathroom. I ran and got my gym teacher and told her what I've seen, and she didn't believe me until a few seconds later another girl came screaming out of the bathroom. The gym teacher went in the bathroom, and soon after, the ambulance had arrived. We were exited out of the gym, and no one would talk about what happened. I was put in counseling, and soon after, my mom took me out of that school. No one ever likes to talk about what happened. I know what I saw, and they do too. They seemed frightened to talk about it. A year later, I was in a different school in Pasadena, Texas, and in the library, I saw that Ann doll again. I knew it was the same one. Never did I go near the library again. What I saw is still engraved in my brain till this day. This next story comes from Mallory, located in California. I was spending the night at a friend's house, and we were watching TV down in her room, and we were home alone. It was about 11 p.m. when I felt uneasy. This was before we found out that her house was haunted. I didn't tell her anything until the feeling of being watched seeped into the room. I told her that I felt like we were being watched, and she also said the same thing. Then we both heard footsteps and scraping of nails on the wall, and it had gotten louder as it walked down the stairs and down the hallway. We both freaked out and just stared at the door. The door swung open, and a 7 or so foot tall figure stood in the doorway. My friend screamed out of fear, and the figure vanished. I looked over at her and said, "What the hell was that?" Her face was white, and we stayed in her room, not moving from our spot. We told her mom after she got home, but she didn't believe us. But we both saw it. The next morning, we searched up the history of her house, and we were both scared to find out that an old man was murdered by his own grandson in an attempt to rob him. I haven't been to her house since. This next story comes from Tatiana, located in Colombia of South America. When I was around 12 years old, my family and I went to visit my uncle in Venezuela. He lived on a farm. My cousins had found a cassette tape that had a lot of paranormal and mythical stories narrated on it. So that night we all sat down and tried to listen, but it never worked. The next day, like 20 minutes before we left, we decided to give it another try, and it worked. But it would only let us play one story, and that one was called The Whistling Man. It is about this guy who killed his father, and he, the father, cursed him right before he died. And long story short, the man had to spend eternity rumbling around lonely places whistling a very particular melody and killing the people he would find alone in the night. 2 days after that, we came home, and then some friends and family came to visit. We were talking about the vacation, and then we decided to tell them about the story. My sister narrated it and whistled the same melody that was on the cassette. After 1.5 hours, our friends were leaving, and then they started messing around, and one of them whistled. And all of a sudden, we heard someone make the same melody about 50 meters from where we were. We were all scared, but the guy did it again, and then we heard the response a lot closer, like 20 meters from our house. It started to get all windy and cold, so we freaked out and entered the house, and then our friends left. The next day, we woke up to find out that the dog of one of our neighbors had been killed that night, from what everyone thought was a wild animal like a coyote or something. Personally, I think it had to do something with the whispers and the whistling. I don't know. We never brought up the story again. This next story comes from Lainey, and I hope I said your name right, from Washington State. One night, my ex-boyfriend and I were bored and wanted to use a Ouija board at our local park. Stupid, I know. So after we finished the session, we were walking back to his house, which was about a 15-minute walk, when we heard light footsteps, like someone was trying to be quiet while walking behind us. Of course, when we looked back, nothing was there, so we ignored it. Until we were about 5 minutes away from his house, where there's this big mailbox coming up on our path. We were about to walk past it until this bizarre sound erupted. It was like the sound you make when you are about to yawn, and we both looked back, curious, and there was this woman dressed in all black, with black eyes and black hair, with no mouth or nose, with her hands positioned like she was grabbing something invisible, just dead on staring at us. I was in too much shock to move. My boyfriend had to legit carry me, bridal style, until I found enough power to sprint to his house and lock everything in my reach. Let's just say I have never played with another Ouija board since. This last story comes from Adriana, located in Canada. My mom met a guy, and they dated for a while. 6 months later, we moved into his house. We lived there for at least 5 years. The first year, it was okay. Nothing paranormal was happening. Until the 3rd year we lived there. The first experience was with my brother. My brother was up very late, around 3 a.m. He was playing video games until he heard something walking around on the roof. He paused his video game, walked out of his room. My brother was starting to get a little terrified. He opened the front door and walked onto the deck. Then he ran in screaming, "There's something on the roof." My mom and her boyfriend woke up and smudged the house. He said it was deformed and also had wings. He was so terrified that now he goes to bed early. He never saw that thing again. One night, I was in the room putting my baby brother to bed when we both fell asleep. At about 2 a.m., I woke up to the sound of my baby brother screaming and crying. Behind that old house, there is a street light that shined into my window and onto the wall. When I woke up, I looked at the wall. There was a shadow of something with wings. I looked at the window and there was a deformed creature staring at us. I grabbed my baby brother and dashed out of the room. I was terrified and my baby brother and I were shaking. I hope you guys enjoyed these stories. Thumbs up if you did. Let me know down below which one you liked best. If you would like to submit your paranormal story, please follow the directions down in the description. And just so you all know, I'm not able to read every single story that is submitted, but maybe your story will be the lucky chosen one for the next video. Please stay tuned for the next, and I love you guys, and I will talk to you later. Bye!